Isaiah Stone clenched the edge of the helicopter door as the ocean stretched endlessly beneath him, his jaw tight, his heart pounding with something dangerously close to desperation. "Sir, we're approaching Isla del Viento," the pilot said through the headset. 10 minutes. He didn't respond, just gave a nod and stared out the glass. The island looked tiny from up here, a speck of green in a sea of blue, but it was the only place no one would find him. No board meetings, no investors, no headlines about his family's betrayal, no cameras, no lies. He was done with New York, done with the Stone name. For now, he just wanted to disappear. When the helicopter touched down on the private helipad behind the resort, Isaiah stepped out into the thick, humid air. The silence here was loud, no horns, no phones. Just wind, waves, and the faint scent of hibiscus. And then he saw her. A woman in cut-off shorts, a white linen shirt knotted at the waist, and a messy ponytail stood at the edge of the landing pad. Her skin was sun-kissed, her hands tucked into her back pockets like she didn't have a care in the world. "Isaiah Stone?" she asked, lifting one brow. He tensed. "Yeah," she smiled. "Welcome to Isla del Viento. I'm Nola Avery. I run the resort while the owner's away." He paused. She didn't stammer over his name, didn't fawn or glance at his watch or shoes. Just stood there, calm and grounded, like she hadn't just met the man Forbes called the coldest billionaire in America. "You're the host." "Yep," she said, already turning toward the path. "Come on, I'll show you your villa." He followed her down the stone trail, flanked by hanging lanterns and palm trees. "You always greet guests in flip-flops. Only the ones who look like they need a good kick in the ego," she tossed back without looking at him. He blinked, then let out something that might have been a laugh. It felt foreign. The villa was tucked into the cliffs with views of the ocean and an infinity pool that looked like it spilled into the horizon. She handed him a welcome drink and a key card. "Don't worry," she said casually. "No one's gonna ask for selfies here. Most people don't even know this place exists. That's what you wanted, right?" His eyes met hers. "How do you know what I wanted?" "Just a guess," she said. "The helicopter, the sunglasses, the jaw clench. Guy like you didn't come here for the happy hour specials." He watched her leave, the sway of her walk as confident as her words, and for the first time in weeks, his mind didn't immediately drift to lawsuits or betrayal. It stayed with her, Nola. The next morning, he found her barefoot in the sand, setting up chairs for a beach yoga class. "You work here every day?" he asked, hands in his pockets. She looked up. "It's a small team." "I do what needs doing. You run the resort and set up yoga mats. You asking for a resume or a session?" He hesitated. "What if I want to talk instead?" She tilted her head. "Then talk." He sat beside her in the sand. The waves rolled in slowly, the heat not yet sharp. He didn't even realize he was talking until the words were already coming out. "My father sold my company behind my back. My brother leaked it to the media. I didn't know who to trust, so I left." Nola didn't react, didn't gasp or pity. She just nodded slowly, looking out at the water. "Family can mess you up worse than any stranger. You know something about that?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "My dad bailed when I was 9. Mom worked 3 jobs. I grew up cleaning motels, not staying in them." He looked at her again, really looked. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you," she said, standing. "Most billionaires don't help reset beach chairs." He frowned. "I'm not," then stopped. "Wait, you knew. You think I don't recognize Isaiah Stone? You bought half of Manhattan. You didn't say anything." "Because I don't care," she said simply. "You're just a guy on a beach here." He stared at her as she walked away again, and for the second time in 2 days, he couldn't stop watching. Later that afternoon, he found her again, this time at the bar, loading a crate of limes. "Nola," she looked up, brushing hair from her face. "You're persistent. I want to know more about you." She leaned her hip against the counter. "Why?" "Because you're the first person who's looked at me like I'm not a billionaire or a headline. You looked at me like I'm human." She paused. Then said quietly, "Maybe because you finally started acting like one." They spent the next few days like that, talking, walking, arguing over who made the better mojito. She was blunt, bright, and never afraid to call him out. And somewhere between a snorkeling trip and a late-night conversation on a hammock, something shifted on the fifth night he cooked for her. It wasn't fancy grilled fish, salad, wine, but he did it himself. No chef. No staff. Just him, shirt sleeves rolled up, barefoot on the villa patio. "You're full of surprises," she said, sipping the wine he picked. "You're the surprise," he said quietly, their eyes locked. Then he kissed her. Slow, deliberate, with the ocean crashing behind them and the stars watching overhead, she didn't pull away. He pulled her into his arms, his hands in her hair, and for once nothing else mattered. Not his name, not his past, just her. When they finally pulled apart, her hand stayed on his chest. "Isaiah, don't say it was a mistake," he whispered. "I wasn't going to," she said, her voice rough. "I was going to say, I haven't felt like this in a long time." He hadn't either. But he wasn't going to let it go, not this time. Isaiah stood beside the open-air market stall, holding a weathered woven basket filled with mangoes and sweet peppers. A soft breeze lifted the scent of grilled plantains and salt water into the air, but all he could focus on was Nola, bartering fluently in Spanish with the old woman behind the table. Her tone was warm but firm, her gestures precise. "Don't let her fool you," the woman said to Isaiah with a wink as Nola handed her a few folded bills. "She drives a hard bargain. She's convincing," Isaiah replied, adjusting the basket in his arms. As they walked away from the stall, Nola glanced sideways. "Convincing. You say that like I'm trying to scam tourists." "I didn't say that," he replied, "but you do have a way of getting what you want." She gave a small shrug. "When you grow up never getting what you want, you learn to work with what's in front of you." They passed a group of musicians playing steel drums under a palm canopy. The beat was vibrant, rhythmic, alive. Nola slowed as a few children danced barefoot on the sand. Isaiah watched her face soften. "You know them?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "I teach English at the community center on Tuesdays. That's Mateo, and that little hurricane in the red shorts is his sister, Liana. Their mom works in housekeeping. You teach on your days off." "I don't get many," she said simply. "But I make time for what matters." Isaiah didn't reply. He looked at her, then, not as a distraction, not as someone temporary, but as a woman who had carved purpose from scarcity. She didn't just run a resort, she held up pieces of a community. "What did you do before this?" he asked. "Before the island," she asked. "I lived in Miami, waitressed, managed a few beach bars, got tired of pretending to flirt for tips. When the job here opened up, I came, started by cleaning rooms. And now you run the place." "Because I earned it," she said, not defensively, just fact. He nodded once. "I believe you." She stopped, turning to face him in the middle of the market. "Why are you really here, Isaiah?" "I told you." "No," she interrupted, her gaze steady. "You told me about the fallout, but why this island? You could have gone anywhere. Why hide?" He considered lying. Spinning something vague, but she wouldn't buy it, and he didn't want to lie to her. "I couldn't breathe back there," he said. "Every step I took, someone was watching, waiting for me to fall or to clean up another family disaster. I didn't choose this island. I chose escape." She didn't move, just studied him like she was reading between lines. "Then maybe it's time to stop running from everything you hate," she said, "and figure out what you actually want." Later that night, he found her on the garden terrace behind the main lodge, stringing soft, white lights between the palm trunks. She was up on a ladder, balancing with one hand while reaching out with the other. "You're going to break your neck," he called. She looked down. "Then catch me." He stepped forward. "That's not funny." "You're right," she said, climbing down. "It's not." He took the strand of lights from her. "Let me help." She handed him the spool wordlessly. They worked in silence as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the sky in molten pink and gold. When the last light was hung, she leaned against the railing and looked out at the sea. "I used to think love was just survival," she said. "Like, if someone didn't leave, that was enough. But lately," he waited. "Lately it feels like I've been asleep for years, and now I'm waking up." He moved closer, his hand brushing hers. "You're not the only one." She looked at him, the distance between them suddenly unbearable, so he closed it. The kiss this time was softer, but no less urgent. Her hands lifted to his collar, his arms wrapped around her waist. The world narrowed to this moment, to her mouth on his, to the quiet hitch of her breath. When they parted, her brow furrowed. "Don't make me fall for you if you're just going to leave." "I won't," he said, voice low, "unless you tell me to." The next morning came with a knock. Isaiah opened the door of his villa to find a man in a linen suit holding an envelope. "Urgent," the man said, handing it off and stepping away. Inside, Isaiah broke the seal with a practiced flick. It was a summons, not from the courts but from his mother. She'd flown into Puerto Rico and she knew he was here. Isaiah stared at the letter, the familiar signature at the bottom. Cold, formal, demanding. He hadn't spoken to her since the betrayal. She'd orchestrated the sale. She'd told him it was for the good of the family. Now she wanted a meeting. He walked down to the cove where Nola was guiding a paddleboard tour. He waited on the rocks until she returned, her hair damp, her skin glowing from the sun. "Bad news?" she asked, seeing his face. "My mother's here, not on the island, but close." She took a breath. "You going to meet her? I don't know." "Well, you should," she said. "Even if it's just to say what you need to say." He looked at her. "What if I don't want to go back to that life?" "Then don't," she said, "but don't pretend it doesn't exist." He touched her cheek, letting his thumb trace her skin. "What if what we've started, it's the only part of my life that feels real?" "Then you fight for it," she said. "But you don't build a future by pretending the past didn't happen." That night, Isaiah sat alone on the edge of the bluff. The island wind was stronger here, pulling at his shirt, carrying the scent of coming rain. He pulled out his phone for the first time in days. No service. But that didn't stop the decision forming in his chest. He would meet his mother, and then he'd come back. Because this time, he wasn't running, not from his past, not from what he felt for Nola, and not from the man he knew he needed to become. The rain began as a whisper, a delicate hush through the canopy above the villa. But by the time Isaiah returned from Puerto Rico, it was coming down in heavy sheets. The island smelled different in the rain, darker, richer, like the earth itself had secrets to tell. He stepped out of the boat and into the downpour without flinching. Nola stood waiting under the overhang at the edge of the dock, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You came back," she said. "I said I would. You were gone 3 days. I needed to finish it." She didn't move toward him, didn't smile, just stared like she was trying to read what the storm hadn't already washed away from his face. "She wants to bring me back into the company," he said, voice low. "Said this whole thing was a test, that she knew I'd disappear, and when I did, I'd realize I couldn't live without it, without them." "That's manipulative," Nola said. "She thinks it's strategy." "And did you tell her no?" "I told her I found something better." This time her expression shifted just slightly. "You mean the ocean views and the hammock, I mean you." She looked away for a second, water dripping from her lashes. "Don't say things like that if you don't mean them." "I don't say anything I don't mean." He stepped closer, rain soaking through his shirt. "I told her I'm selling my shares, all of them. I'm done with the stones, the board, the name. I'm starting something else. Something mine. You're walking away from billions," he nodded. "Because I finally understand none of it means anything if I'm not the one choosing it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "You look different." "I feel different." They stood in silence, the rain thundering around them. Then she turned and walked up the path toward the villas. He followed. Inside, she tossed him a towel. He caught it and dried his hair, watching her move to the kitchen and pour a glass of water. "You're not surprised," he said. "No," she replied. "Only wondering what you'll do now." "I want to build something here, not just stay. I want to invest in the island, train locals, expand the center, give kids real options. I've got the funds, I just need someone who knows how this place really works." She didn't respond right away. "I don't want to own the island," he said. "I want to be part of it." "You think you can do that?" "I think I can learn." She finally looked at him, and something in her face softened, not approval exactly, but recognition. You're not who you were when you got off that helicopter. I don't want to be. That night, they took shelter in the villa, the storm battering the windows. Thunder rumbled like distant drums, but inside was quiet. Nola sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through a worn photo album she'd pulled from a cabinet. He sat beside her, bare feet against the cool tile. "Is that your mom?" he asked, nodding toward a picture of a woman standing in front of a laundromat, apron stained but smiling. "Yeah," Nola said. "She used to work 16-hour days, still managed to come to every school play, every parent-teacher conference. She's the reason you don't settle. She's the reason I never expect anything to come easy." He turned a page and paused. A photo of Nola, maybe 5 years younger, standing beside a man in a faded red Sox tee, both of them laughing at something off camera. "Boyfriend?" she said. "He left when I got promoted and started making more than him. Idiot." She gave a small shrug. "He wasn't built for someone like me." Isaiah reached out, touched her hand. She didn't pull away. "You scare me a little," he admitted. "Why?" "Because I didn't think I could want someone this much." She closed the album slowly, set it aside. "You ever think you want me because I'm the first real thing you've touched since your world collapsed?" he answered without hesitation. "I want you because you're the only person who's ever seen me. And the only one I trust to tell me the truth, even when it hurts." She stood, walked to the window. Lightning flashed, illuminating her silhouette. "You're serious about staying? I'm serious about you." She turned, hair shadowing her face. "Then prove it." "How?" "Tomorrow's the Island Council meeting. They're voting on a development proposal that would put a luxury chain hotel on the other side of the beach. Locals hate it. Investors love it. You want to be part of this island. Show them you're not just another rich man with a vision." He nodded. "I'll be there." The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the island washed clean. Isaiah wore a linen shirt, sleeves rolled, and stood at the back of the community hall as the meeting began. Locals packed into the long room, voices low, energy tense. The presenter from the hotel chain spoke first: charts, profits, promises of jobs. Isaiah watched Nola lean against the wall near the entrance, arms folded, unreadable. When the floor opened for public comments, he stepped forward. Heads turned, a few murmurs. "I'm Isaiah Stone," he said. "Some of you know the name, some of you don't, but I came here thinking I needed to escape. What I found was a place that reminded me what life looks like when people actually care about each other." He paused. "I'm not here to build on your land, I'm here to listen. And if you'll let me, I'd like to invest in what's already here, not change it, support it, fund the community center, expand local businesses, no hotels, no chains, just a partnership on your terms." It was quiet for a beat too long. Then a woman near the back stood up. "Why should we believe you?" "Because I'm willing to sign over every cent of my proposed investment to a local trust governed by the council, no strings." The room erupted into whispers. Later, as people filed out, a man clapped Isaiah on the shoulder. "You're different from the others." "I'm trying to be." Outside, Nola was waiting. "You meant it," she said, every word. She stared up at him, the sunlight catching her face. "Okay," she said, "then maybe we give this thing a real shot." He stepped closer, heartbeat loud in his chest. "We already are." The island's evening air carried a weightless warmth, the kind that settled on your skin and made you forget the rest of the world ever existed. Isaiah stood barefoot on the back veranda of Nola's cottage, the gentle rustle of palm leaves above him, the faint clink of silverware and quiet laughter from nearby villas drifting on the breeze. Inside, Nola was lighting candles one by one along the dining table. Each flickering flame added a soft, golden hue to the space, transforming the room into something intimate and quietly celebratory. She moved with practiced ease, yet something about her motions tonight felt slower, more deliberate. Isaiah stepped in, brushing his hand over the doorframe. "You planning a dinner party I wasn't invited to?" She glanced back, candlelight dancing in her eyes. "You're not a guest. You're the reason." He tilted his head. "For what?" "For the first time in a long while, this place feels like home. Not just for me, but for everyone. He walked to the table, eyeing the fresh-cut bread, roasted vegetables, and grilled snapper that filled the air with something rich and comforting. "You cooked all this. I had help." She gestured toward the back door. Matteo's mom came by. "Said thanks for what you did at the council meeting." "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," she said, meeting his gaze. "That's what scares me." His brow furrowed. "Why would that scare you?" "Because people who don't want anything in return are usually the ones who end up leaving." "I'm not leaving." She set the last candle down, then leaned on the edge of the table. "You still have the option to." "I don't. That's the difference between us." "No," she said softly. "The difference is, I've spent most of my life building things for other people. You're the first person who ever asked if I wanted to build something together." He stepped closer, voice low. "Then let's start now." She looked up at him, and for a moment, the silence between them said more than any confession could. Later that night, after they cleared the dishes and the last candle burned low, Isaiah reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded envelope. "I didn't want to show you this until I was sure." She took it, brows raised. "What is it?" "Deed papers. I bought the bluff." Her eyes widened. "You what?" "The undeveloped land past the cove. It was going to be part of the hotel expansion, but after the vote, the project lost funding. The landowner was looking to sell. I made an offer." She opened the envelope slowly, scanning the documents. "You're not planning to build another resort, are you?" "No," he said. "I want to build a school, a permanent one with real resources, trained teachers, tech access. I already reached out to a foundation I helped fund in Nairobi. They're flying in a team to consult." Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came. "You're not the only one who wants to give these kids more than survival." She set the envelope down and crossed the room toward him. "You didn't have to do this. I know, that's why it matters." She touched his face then, fingertips grazing the edge of his jaw. There was no heat in the room, yet his chest burned under her touch. "Isaiah," she whispered, "are you sure you're ready for a life this quiet?" He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "I'm not here for quiet, I'm here for you." They kissed again, but this time there was no question, no hesitation. It was a promise, one that didn't need words. The next morning, they walked together to the community center, where children were already gathering for their weekend classes. Matteo waved from the doorway, holding a sketch pad. Liana chased a stray chicken across the path. Isaiah crouched beside Matteo. "What's that?" The boy flipped the pad toward him. A detailed drawing of a classroom, complete with bookshelves, plants by the windows, and a giant chalkboard. "Think you can help me build that?" Isaiah asked. Matteo nodded. "If you get the bricks, I'll do the rest." Nola laughed beside them, then linked her arm through Isaiah's as they turned down the path toward the bluff. As they reached the edge, she paused. "There's something I need to say." He faced her. "Okay. I've spent my whole life preparing for people to leave, but I never prepared for someone to stay, and I think that terrified me more than being alone. I'm not leaving, even if the island loses its magic." He smiled, but gently this time. "That's not possible." "You are the magic." She blinked quickly, then pressed her lips together. He reached into his pocket, her breath caught. "What are you doing?" "I was going to wait until the school was finished," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "But you said you wanted something we could build together. And I think we've already started." She stared at the box, then back at him. He opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, a single emerald set in a thin band of platinum. He looked up at her, eyes steady. "Nola Avery, will you marry me? Not tomorrow, not next year, now, here. With the waves behind us and the sky above us and this crazy, beautiful life ahead of us. Will you be mine?" She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just nodded, slow and sure, and then whispered, "Yes." "Of course, yes." They kissed as the wind picked up around them, the ocean stretching out like a promise, the island blooming behind them, not just as a place but as a beginning. He had come to the island to vanish. Instead, he had found a life he never knew he needed. And the one woman who would make it all worth staying for. The wedding took place exactly 12 days later. just as the sun dipped low enough to cast the entire bluff in a dusky gold that turned the ocean into molten glass. There was no cathedral, no orchestra, no press. Just a handmade archway woven with wild island orchids, a path of palm fronds, and a congregation of souls who had built their lives under the same sky. Isaiah stood with his sleeves rolled, sandals forgotten, hair tousled by the breeze. His eyes never left the narrow path leading from the cove, and when Nola appeared barefoot, radiant, wearing a cream dress stitched by the local seamstress with a crown of plumeria tucked into her curls, he forgot how to breathe. She walked steadily, her hand resting on Mateo's shoulder as he led her forward with the gravity of a boy who knew he was part of something bigger than himself. Behind them, Liana scattered petals with more enthusiasm than precision, each toss completely off rhythm and entirely perfect. When Nola reached Isaiah, she didn't say anything right away. She just looked up at him, her eyes fierce and shining. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice low enough only he could hear. "Not even a little," he whispered. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The vows weren't scripted, they weren't rehearsed, but when Isaiah spoke, his voice carried across the cliff like it belonged there. "I didn't come here looking for you. I came here trying to disappear. But you looked at me like I wasn't broken, and then you handed me a hammer and dared me to rebuild." Nola's voice didn't tremble when she answered. "I didn't expect love, I didn't trust it, but you didn't ask me to change. You stood beside me, you waited. And now, I don't want a life without you in it." There were no rings, just two thin bands carved from driftwood by a local artisan, oiled and polished until they gleamed soft and dark. When Isaiah slid hers onto her finger, her hand didn't shake at all. The wind caught her hair as they kissed, and somewhere behind them, someone let out a cheer that set off half the island into clapping and whooping. The sound carried through the trees and over the waves, a celebration not of wealth or spectacle, but of something far rarer: truth. By nightfall, the bluff was strung with lanterns, and long tables overflowed with food brought by every family within walking distance. There was roasted fish wrapped in banana leaves, coconut rice, pineapple glazed pork, and cassava cakes so sweet Isaiah nearly proposed again just for another bite. They danced barefoot in the sand, not to a DJ but to the same musicians who played in the market every Saturday, their drums echoing against the cliffs. Nola's laughter rose above the beat, and Isaiah, who had once ruled boardrooms with an iron voice, now couldn't speak a word without smiling. As the night deepened, they slipped away from the crowd and walked down to the cove, hand in hand, the tide warm around their ankles. "You know what I realized today," she said, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the surface. "What? You never asked me what kind of wedding I wanted. I thought you'd tell me if it mattered. It didn't." She turned to him, "because it was never about the ceremony, it was about the life we're building after." "I've already started the paperwork for the school," he said. "The foundation's sending over the modular plans next week, and I've hired 3 teachers to train with the team in San Juan." "You're serious," she said, voice soft. "I'm not just building a school," he said. "I'm building a life with you." They walked farther along the shore, the waves kissing their feet. "Do you think it'll always be this easy?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I think it'll always be worth it." A few paces ahead, a swing hung from an old tree branch, its rope worn smooth from years of salt and sun. Nola climbed on, and Isaiah stood behind, pushing her gently until her laughter echoed through the trees. When she jumped down, she turned and pressed her palm to his chest. "This is the part where you tell me you're happy." "I'm more than happy," he said. "I'm finally home." 3 years later, the school opened its doors beneath a carved wooden arch that read, "La Casa del Futuro." Children ran through bright yellow hallways, their laughter bouncing off walls painted by local artists. Nola taught creative writing twice a week, and Isaiah handled logistics, funding, and every maintenance issue that involved a ladder. They lived in a cottage built just above the school, where the breeze carried the scent of salt and hibiscus through every open window. Their bedroom overlooked the sea. There was always sand on the floor and always music somewhere nearby. On the first day of summer, Nola stood on the patio, her dress clinging to her legs in the breeze, a mug of tea in her hand. Isaiah came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You ready?" he asked. "For what?" He kissed the curve of her neck. "The next chapter," she smiled. "We've only just started." Near the edge of the bluff, a child's voice called their names. They turned to see Mateo, now taller, waving from the swing. Liana was building a sandcastle below, her curls wild with wind. Nola reached for Isaiah's hand. They walked down together. They had all the time in the world.